All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Stephen Teal, with your host of the Northwest Fishing Club. Thank you for joining us live tonight. I've got my co-host Todd Logan with us, and we've also got our very first special guest, Mr. Bass Fishing Prodigy, Colby Pearson, with us tonight. For those of you that don't know, Colby, he's a professional bass fisherman from Central Point, Oregon. I first heard his name when I was in high school, reading the local newspaper and saw this story about a 12-year-old kid that caught and released a potential state record largemouth. And then followed him on social media and watched him catch 8-pounder after 8-pounder after 8-pounder. And literally, it's what seemed like every day a monster bass. And eventually watched him go on to almost win the national high school bass fishing title. So, Colby, thank you for joining us tonight. How's your week going so far?
Really good, man. I appreciate you guys having me on and looking forward to talking fishing. And it's cool to get together with yourself as well as Todd, two people that I've come to know pretty well over the last 10 or 15 years or whatever, fishing in Southern Oregon and all around the Northwest. So I'm excited to jump into it and glad to be here.
Heck yeah, man. It's been awesome watching you just kind of from that little kid growing up.
Yeah, it's been a long journey, man. I told the guy a couple weeks ago, like, getting to where I've gotten to now in the fishing industry and competing is like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Is like a joke, you know. I love doing it. I'm super fortunate, man, but it's been a heck of a road getting here and a lot of work and perseverance. And I'm really lucky that I found something that captivated me from a young age and stuck with it. And it's taken me to a lot of really cool places and met a lot of cool people.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really awesome, man.
One of the, I knew you were going to be on, and, one of the things, how long did it take you to get rid of the anxiety of, I have to catch a fish? Because when I'm guiding, the days where, we have to catch fish, not that it always happens, but I find myself getting penned up and that's all I can focus on. And then I have to make myself just kind of relax, and then it all starts coming together. But you're fishing for some pretty big payouts and all that. How long did it take you to get used to that anxiety and then to be able to control?
Yeah, it's so funny because right before starting this podcast, I was talking to my tournament partner about controlling anxiety, and he's watching a lot of like tutorials and documentaries about playing poker. And we've always compared poker to bass fishing, especially competitive bass fishing, because top tier bass fishermen, top tier poker players, anybody competing at any sport that's really mental, their composure has to be really similar. There's a certain amount of variables that I can control, but most of them I can't. You're not going to be able to control the way that those cards are going to turn over on the table, just like I'm not going to be able to control how those fish are going to adapt. I just have to make educated decisions based on the observations that I get during the time when I'm competing or fishing. So I hope that someday I master it and I truly have perfect composure all the time, but I'd be lying if I said it's totally dialed. I have gotten better. These days I compete on the Wild West Bass Trail Apex Cup Series, which is a predominantly Western circuit, top tier professional level. And it doesn't have any practice. So I was just telling my buddy that I've been able to internalize a lot of that stress and a lot of that anxiety and function properly and make good decisions because now I fish in tournaments that unfold in front of me and I have no preconceived notions. So it's a work in progress, man, but it took a long time and it took a lot of competing, constant exposure and practice before I was out there at a really high level, functioning and making good decisions on the water and being successful. So
gotcha.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because when the chips are down, it's hard not to go back to that go-to bait when you fight it, because it's not the right one, but it's the bait that it's your go-to, and so that's that second guessing myself till that first fish hits the boat, and maybe it's a lot like the same for you. When that first fish hits the boat, you can see the mood in the whole boat change, and everybody just kind of, all right, we're doing it, it's working, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could start the game with pocket aces and think that you're going to have it made, but the conditions don't always play in your favor. You always want to digress and go back to your confidence baits, but you might not be reading the conditions properly. So I always approach it with an open mind. If I'm out on the water and I'm kind of like maybe not on it as good as I should, a lot of times I just kind of idle out between spots and turn everything off my motor and I just sit there for a minute. even in competition, I just say, all right, man, like this isn't happening. What's going on? You know what I mean? I'm not listening to music. I'm not on my phone. I'm not looking at my electronics. I'm just sitting there, you know, kind of in nature and saying, hey, the wind's blowing northwest at 4 miles an hour. It's the end of March. The sun's still generally in the southern hemisphere. These banks are getting sun, seasonal movements, all things considered. And then I can make an educated decision. So a lot of times just stopping, you know, and considering what's going on. And that's how I can kind of get over that hurdle and make the right call for what's next.
That's
Getting out of that tunnel vision.
Yeah. Yep. And I've bass fished forever, man, my whole life. Super lucky, 20 plus years of bass fishing experience. And I started competing when I was 10, you know, so a lot of volume, you know, a lot of volume on the water.
So how'd things get started when you were 10? I mean, you know, what led up to like you starting to do tournaments? What even led, I mean, you caught that state record fish when you were 12, right? So,
yeah,
I mean, what led up to that point where you as a kid actually released a potential state record?
Yeah. So it all started out in 1997 or so. My grandparents moved out and they had some property out in the woods and they had a pond. And I kind of noticed how that ecosystem functioned. And there was bluegill and catfish and some bass and some other fish in there. And I kind of like established the hierarchy of the order in the pond. You know, the bluegill were kind of the smaller fish and they exist at this level. And then, you know, the catfish are doing their own thing, but the bass are kind of like the king and feeding on everything. So I immediately got interested in that organization and how the bass were the more apex fish in the freshwater ecosystem. They were predatory. So I got interested in catching them as like a prestigious prize when I was like 4 years old. Okay. You know, fast forward with some time and you're watching outdoor channels growing up, you're seeing Roland Martin Outdoors and Bill Dance and eventually bass tournaments. And I saw that, you know, you could be competitive with it and maybe garner some sponsorships and potentially make a living, so on and so forth. So I was just smitten from the beginning, man. Absolutely obsessed with bass fishing my entire life. I remember in 2000 and I think it was 3, Mike Iaconelli won the Bassmasters Classic, and he's like a super high energy, loud, screaming bass fisherman. Really, really notable if you're familiar with him in terms of your own memory, you know, like you're not going to forget this guy. And, you know, that kind of sparked a tournament interest. And then probably about 2005, I was camping at Hyatt Lake and met a young kid. Him and his dad had a bass boat. And I was just like so amazed by this glittery, sparkly boat. And they're so cool, you know. And, you know, he ended up becoming like my best friend. Miles and his dad, Brett, really got me into competing in tournament fishing. I remember I was staying in a tent trailer with my mom, would always have us up there on the lake. And I tied a bubblegum super fluke like to my finger. And I was like, hey, if you guys go fishing in the morning, like just come to my camp and pull on the pink fluke. and I'll wake up and go with you. So, I mean, the rest was history, man. Brett Hansen owns Hansen Tires in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Great local business over there. Big supporter of fishing tournaments and getting me into fishing my whole life. He made it possible to get me on boats and would kind of lobby for some veteran anglers, older guys, to say, hey, man, take Colby out. He's 10, but he's good. And dude, eventually people just started to kind of buy in and take me, and they provided me that experience to get into competing and tournament fishing at a super young age. I'm like eternally grateful and indebted to the Hansens and the Klamath Falls Bassmasters and Butch and Mike Ewing and everybody who took me out when I was really young. Because if they didn't do that, man, who knows when I would have got really involved in tournaments. And then started fishing as a boater in these tournaments when I was like 15 or 16, you know. I used to get dropped off at the lake. And my stepdad, man, he would tow. I had a boat before I ever had a car or a truck. And awesome. he would tow me to the lake, and I'd be like, cool, like just drop me off for a few days. And I was like, you know, 16 or 17 with a cooler of like the like 3 foot long, like $12 sandwich from Safeway and like a bunch of water. That's like all I could afford, and like just enough gas to like putt around the lake for days. And I'd sleep on the boat. And he picked me up in a few days, and I was competing at this time too. And like, I'll never forget, there was guys in some of the clubs I was fishing that were like kind of like bummed and annoyed that like this kid was like living on the lake, even though he was young. and then they'd go compete, and like there was a couple years, dude, where before I stepped up to more of like a professional or regional level fishing, I was competing locally, like, but I told myself, you can only compete as a regional guy or a pro if you're like angler of the year in the club. So I mean, I took that like as serious as I've ever taken anything. Like I had to beat everyone all the time. And we had a really good year that year. I mean, I think we won like half the tournaments we entered and got second in the rest of them pretty much. And the last tournament I think that all I had to do was pay my entry fee. I didn't actually have to catch a fish because I was doing so well in points. But anyways, dude, that was a long time ago, and I'm super thankful for the opportunity back then and the friends that I met. And then, yeah, dude, high school fishing, got involved with that. My tournament partner and like one of my best buddies too, Jacob Wall, he's competing on the Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit as a big time pro. He's made like 200 grand in just tournament winnings the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm so proud of him. And we fished high school, and you're right, we went to South Carolina on Lake Murray, and we got second in nationals. The state of Oregon was second in the nation for high school fishing in 2012, I think.
That's pretty crazy.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
Most people don't even know that there is high school bass fishing.
Yeah,
at least around here.
Yeah. Back then, I was the only member of the Crater High School bass fishing team, and Jacob went to St. Mary's, and I think he was the only one there. So, yeah. And then that was kind of catches us up through at least graduating high school. And then, man, it's been a long road even since then.
I bet.
Yep.
So how do go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead, Todd.
So how, where you are now in the circuit that you're on, what's the next step? What do you have to accomplish now to get to that next step for you?
Yeah. So mostly what I'm fishing is the Wild West Bass Trail. I fish the Pro-Ams, and I fish the Apex Cup, which is, like I said, the premier competition for the West. For me to go fish nationally, I would either qualify through Bass Nation and then qualify to fish the Bassmaster Elite Series, or I could just fish the Western Toyota Series through Major League Fishing and qualify to go fish the Tour. Apex provides us opportunities to compete at like I won't say like a national touring level, but a really high stakes professional level out west. So I'm really glad to do that, and I kind of don't want to move back east right now. On like a personal note, like I love fishing in the West. It's so freaking good, dude. And people say it's tough, and yeah, it is. Sometimes it's really tough to fish for bass out here and stuff. And we don't maybe have like the really prestigious lakes, but like, dude, there's some lakes around here that are like, I talk to Jacob like every day, and he lives in Alabama, and he hammers them, dude. But I'm like, God, dude, I want to come back and fish with you so bad, but like, look at this. I caught all these last week. And that's like, every time I'm out here, I'm like, God, could I really leave these fish right now? They're biting so good, and they're so big, and I'm the only one here, type thing.
Right.
But yeah, I'd say in the next 5 years, I do intend to fish the Toyota Series and qualify for the Tour and just do it, man. Like,
but
just to say I did, man. Hang my hat on that run type.
That's
thing.
what it takes, though, is moving back east, just because that's where the big tournaments are.
Yeah, for me, it would be moving back east because, I'm not independently wealthy enough to go like, say I'm going to drive across the country for 10 or 20 events or whatever. So I would have to move back east. And I mean, I'm not going to say it's a goal because I like it out here, but it's for my life. I want to do it once and go compete at that level. And just for the hell of it, dude, it's someday I'll do it. But right now I'm so stoked just doing what I'm doing and having the opportunities to compete professionally out here and have a job that I can go and do that generally, is pretty awesome too. So
what's the big difference between like West Coast and East Coast? Is it just that there's more money in the tournaments back east, or?
I'd say it's culture. Out here, you guys are the king, man. Like, you got trout, salmon, steelhead. That's like number one in the whole Northwest. A lot bass fishing's growing. You know, I started working at Sportsman's Warehouse when I was like 18, right out of high school. So 10 years ago. And I'd say that like 80% of my clientele at first were salmon, steelhead, river guys, and then a little bit of like kokanee trolling, trout stuff in the summer. And it shifted. It bums me out because there's reasons why it shifted, and some of it's like
right,
you know, just the rivers aren't producing like they used to. But dude, 60% of my people that come in I talk to now are bass guys, not just because it's me. I mean, it really is high volume now. So it's cool to see, you know, people are fishing. I think that through the last couple of years of everything going on, license sales for hunting and fishing are significantly up and breaking records across the country. And like, dude, that's so good to hear, because there's times where I've been worried, you know, like I don't see a lot of people fishing and hunting and doing outdoor stuff, and to see the industry thriving is like super key for me, not just being in part of the retail side of things, but like it's important, man. It's a way of life, and it's kept me on the straight and narrow forever. So
heck yeah. I mean, that's the big thing, you know, is the opportunities for anybody to get out fishing. You know, I mean, your story sounds a lot like mine. You know, we were both addicted when we were young, and now it's just kind of feeling that high every time that we need to get out, you know?
Yeah.
And so,
yeah. And then like, I think that a lot of people, like, you know, they get into like Todd's point where he's fished so much that he wants to just teach people how to fish and go guide them. And I'm like, I mean, I talk to my friends all the time. I was like, dude, like, I can't be a guide. And they're like, why is that? You'd be a great guide. I'm like, because I want to catch all of them myself. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I pull up on a point and be like, bro, they're here. Like, you got to get them. And they'd miss one. And I'd like grab the rod and be like, watch, like, boom, there she is. You know, so I know that probably someday I'll probably outgrow the hype of that stuff and want to guide too. But God, in the meantime, dude, I'm going to catch every fish I can put my hands on.
Well, and keep in mind, Colby, I just learned how to text 2 years ago. I'm old.
Yeah.
So, but no, it's to reiterate, you know, what you said about the market 5 years ago. You know, that's why I started focusing inland, because if you follow the tackle trends, bass and kokanee were eating up, was like 82 or 87% of the market share. And so what that told me was people are tired of lack of opportunity in the rivers. And so I'm going to provide an opportunity that people want to go catch fish. Yeah. And so we started focusing on that. And
yeah,
man,
that
I'm
was
glad
such a clutch move, man. And a lot of my buddies who are guides that are still super successful, prominent guides in the area, have every single one of them are catering to a secondary species, which is cool. And it's a testament to the caliber of anglers, man. And the deal that you guys got going up for those lake trout, that's like the sickest thing ever. And you guys are doing it the right way. So I'm being a retail guy for like a career and a long-term fisherman. I'm like pretty picky who I really support, dude, because I can impact you know, who customers go to and stuff, but you guys are doing it right. You guys got my backing 100%. I've been out with you guys, and it's like totally worth it, and I can't wait to go back, man.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we'll make it happen, because I know you know, I mean, it's the right time of year to fish how you want to fish, you know, because I mean, how we fish, it's just not your style. It's just not what you're, you know, I mean, because fishing, I love the process. I love figuring out how to make them fire every day. You know, I mean, we go to, you know, what we know, but you know, I'm always looking to get that next great technique down, you know, and like we were talking before, you know, the electronics that we have on our boats are second, you know, next level, you know, and once you see them, you know, but how you like to fish, I know you're going to stand in front of my boat casting all day. And so, you know, I'm not going to have you jigging at 180 feet, because you're not going to enjoy that. It's not just catching the fish for us. It's catching the fish how we want to, you know, beating them at their own game with our personal techniques is one of the things that I enjoy about it. You know, I mean, you know, that's why I don't like trolling. It's like watching paint dry.
Yep. So. I totally agree. And after fishing for like well over 20 years myself, man, I love to be surprised, you know, like there's a certain amount of variables that I can consider and be like, yeah, dude, the odds of this and that and this and that pretty high. But then I'm like, well, maybe I'll try this, and it works. And I'm like, oh, dude, that gets me more fired up than anything. Is when I'm like, oh, there's something else going on, and I'm like, this is cool, you know. So I live for that stuff, man.
We had a bait up there this year that Cody brought up, and he gave me one, give Alex one, and I tried it. And I'm like, this thing is a paperweight, and I threw it down in my side tray, you know. And we're all fishing, you know how we fish pretty close together, and Cody hooks one. He goes, he ate it. I can't believe he ate it. So, but it's that surprise, right? It's like, you know, you're spot on with your technique, and there's no reason why you shouldn't eat it. But it's always awesome to have that surprise moment of, I can't believe that just worked. Yeah. And then they both could catch fish on it. You think I could? I never caught a fish off that bait all season. And so there's something to it. Those guys had it down. I did.
Yeah. Every year I focus on a couple new techniques, and it's funny because I think I catch the same fish no matter what. Like some years it's a big giant swim bait, and the next year I'm like, I'm going to throw a crankbait or a lipless crankbait or a float and fly. And I'll be danged, man. Like I always catch seems like the same caliber of fish on whatever one once I get confident, find the pattern, and that's just fishing. We convince ourselves of so many truths that aren't exactly necessarily
true. With no data to back any of it up, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you know, I know you, but what is your favorite style to catch bass? What is, you know, if you're just fun fishing, just go enjoy your day, what is it?
So I want to use the term gained notoriety pretty lightly. But throwing big, giant, huge swim baits for bass is my favorite thing ever. Like a big, giant chunk of rubber, like 6 or 8 ounces on like what would be the equivalent of like a heavier than a salmon rod. Like the rods I use for bass would make like a back bounce rod look like a finesse rod. I mean, seriously, they're like 4 to 16 ounce, 15 to 40 pound line, like full blown pool cue rods for throwing giant slabs of rubber. And I started doing that probably like not quite 15 years ago, but definitely like 10, 12 years ago. And I definitely had a fragment of time, 5, 6 years where all I did was trophy hunt for bass, the biggest ones I could catch. If my buddies invited me to fish somewhere and I thought my chances of catching a 10-pounder were slim to none, I was not going to go. I just wanted to dedicate every minute of every second of every day to going out and just targeting giants, usually with like an 8 to 12 inch trout swim bait. So that's super near and dear to my heart. I love doing that. But if you were to look at the deck of my boat present day, like on a day where I'm fun fishing just for me, it's like 6 rods that you're like, oh my God, is he fishing for sharks? And then like 6 rods with like teeny tiny little worms and to finesse fish too. And I don't say finesse fish to like catch a lot or just have fun and dink around or whatever, but like it's super funny because my style is like real controlling. I want to like visualize what's going on the spot and my timing and consider everything and then show up and then be effective as an angler. Almost like a hunting mentality. And if those big ones aren't going to eat that swim bait, I'm going to catch those big old suckers on a worm, like a little plastic worm. I guarantee you. I've caught so many big fish on spinning rods, it's not even funny. And nobody knows that. Everybody thinks for sure it's all giant rubber baits. No. It's like 50% rubber baits, 50% little tiny baits.
Well, and it's funny you say that because that's one of the things that I coach people into. You know, you have to jig in the first half hour the same way that you do at hour 5 when you're a little bit defeated, you know, because you can see the fish on the screen, you know, he's right there, but they're not firing. And I try to get everybody to paint that mental picture in your mind of what that bait is doing and see it in your head, you know, to make it dance like, you know, I mean, I watch countless videos of minnows dying, you know, because I try to get my jigs to dance that erratic. And so, you know, we're playing around with stick weights, you know, I mean, I got some that look like porcupines. There's more stick lead in those things to get them to roll. I mean, I'm constantly messing with that stuff. And, but you know, I'm like you, I make myself see it. And then I think, okay, it did that, it did this. And then pretty soon, I bet in the next 4 years, I'll be able to watch it on TV on my boat. I'll be able to see it real time of what that jig is doing.
Yeah.
But,
no, you had a really key point there too when you said you got to jig the same on hour 5 as you do on hour 1. And it goes back to like the mental fortitude and that confidence behind fishing and relating to poker. Like you can be a dang good poker player by having mental fortitude and considering all the variables and not getting worn out by the end of the game, man. And that's what it is. To compete or to be successful as a guide or anything, you got to be mentally connected every minute and processing the conditions as they present themselves, because there's bite windows that are going to occur, and it might be 1 p.m. It might be 10 a.m. We can kind of get an idea when it should be, but we're not always right.
No.
There's been so many days where I've been pulled up, the last hole. We got 30 minutes to kill this last hole, and that saves the day. You get the people, they're still dialed in, they're still into it. And just that last little bit, if they can pull it out, stay into it, keep doing what they need to do right. I mean, you can actually end up and salvage that day pretty fast.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and you just never know, and there's a lot of factors that go into it. And I'm looking at a list, a couple of the biggest fish I've ever caught, and every single one besides one was in the middle of the day when everybody else would be giving up. Probably 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. is my peak window to catch the biggest bass in any body of water, and I caught one at night. That's the only outlier on the whole list. So
you keep track of everyone you've ever caught? Big bass?
Not everyone I've ever caught, but I kept logs for probably 2 years. When I was trophy hunting, I was notating moon phase, time of year, what the general setup was, what bait it was, all things considered. And there's like legitimate and serious trends that if you think about will frustrate you because you want to go be successful all the time. And there's specific windows that are ultra high success.
Yeah, so we saw that pattern of when you have the best chance at the probability is more likely than not, right? Is that window. And so when you do find those conditions in that window, then we're not, that's when we're not messing around anymore. We're going to work and we're serious about this.
Yeah, the biggest fish in any ecosystem, I mean, most predatory fish are going to be generally visual feeders. We have a lot of clear water in the Northwest in these reservoirs and stuff. So people say that predators have, I guess, the odds in their favor in low light, morning and evening and nighttime. And generally, yeah, but they're visual, man, and they're apex predators. Those giant Lakers you're targeting are 10+ pound largemouth or 6 pound smallmouth. They're the masters of their environment. They know everything that's normal that should happen in the course of a day and everything that's abnormal that happens in the course of a day. And I find that typically the high pressure, sunny, they can see, they're very aware of their surroundings. That's when those fish are actually feeding the most. And you think that it'd be the least. It's totally opposite. If I could get a light breeze on a real sunny day, at like 11, that's all I could ask for. The wind is going to make light refraction better. It's just going to make it so they can't see quite as good, and that's super key. And then middle of the day, I think those fish are the most active. They're still opportunistic, so I think they might be able to over compete some similar smaller size fish and actually get your bait. All mine are all middle of the day.
I have a theory on that because we Mackinac the predator fish as well. And everybody thinks, they can't, everybody has this unrealistic idea of what fish can see at 100 or, there's some of those we're dropping in on 180 feet deep.
Yeah.
And Alex had a fish. We were just getting some promotional stuff. And so that fish, I don't know if he felt it on his lateral line or seen it, but when that jig hit 20 feet, he was sitting at 90. Before that jig made it another 20 feet, he had it in his mouth. And what we see early in the morning is those fish are hunting so hard that the chances of you casting and landing that bait in front of their nose to where, because I think they have an idea in their head of what they're going to get. And unless you just perfectly place it on their nose, they're not going to deviate from that plan because they know where they're going. So I agree. Later in the afternoon, when those fish start settling down and start just kind of, because they don't have, they got to be more weary because of the light. So because their prey can see them just like, they can. And so once they slow down, then I can target them. And that's why all of our big fish come at that 10 o'clock, but it has to have a little chop. Those days where it's glass, literally, you might as well reel in and go to the fire. I mean, we can still get them to go, but it is not easy because they are on threat.
Absolutely. And the key point you mentioned, that you're setting me up for all these good observations, which is great. I appreciate it. You said in the morning, those fish are hunting super actively. And I mean, big bass are the same way, man. They're out moving around. And the one thing that I've grown good at, and I put a lot of emphasis in learning, is weather conditions set fish up. In high pressure, light breeze, something like that, those fish are going to be where Colby knows where to look for them. Right. You know what I mean? If it's like crazy gnarly windstorm and they might be going absolutely aggro on a school of trout and chasing them all over, but guess what? I'm not good at going and finding a needle in a haystack, bass pursuing trout actively in pelagic zones. It's not my forte, but I can tell you where that bass lives and where he sets up and where he feeds before the school of trout pulls him off the spot. And he's there when it's high pressure, sunny. It's where he lives, man. Find a key structure on a break, a main river channel, and the reservoir, and that's the recipe. She lives there.
Yeah, and my fishery is the same way. It's people have this unrealistic, not unrealistic. It's they're trying to learn it through somebody else's experience, and a lot of the ways that we fish for them, it goes against everything that anybody will tell you anywhere, that's not how you do this. And I don't know if it's how you do it or not. That's just how we catch it. Because we're targeting that like you, I don't want to catch a lesser fish. I want 20 plus pounds every fish, or I just don't want it to bite. That's just that's my standard. But you catch enough fish to where you can be snobbish. You see enough 20 pounders to where you're like, we can do this. And so we have that confidence. It's just how you push that confidence forward to where people understand that, we're not, we're never happy with, once I catch that state record and get a video of him swimming away from my boat, I will be happy for about an hour. And then I want to catch him again the next day. Hopefully he ate more fish and he's he's half a pound heavier. And so it definitely getting out of your comfort zone, right? I mean, I think that's one of the things is making yourself get out of that. We all have our go-tos, but like I said, are there days where you just have to make yourself get out of that comfort zone to just say, hey, this is it. I have nothing else. I'm just going to throw the most random, wacky, here we go. Do you ever, I mean, not in a tournament setting because there's too much on the line, there's too much at risk, right? But when you're pre-fishing, do you have those days you allow yourself that opportunity?
Yeah. And I really did a lot growing up. Tons of experimentation, dropped this kid off at the pond and he's trapped for like dawn till dusk because he said he wanted to then, even though it's 2 p.m. and he's boiling, hiding under a tree. But yeah, dude, I've tried, I've tried every single type of lure configuration and colors and stuff. And I have a really routine observation base of lure selection. And I'm lucky that I've had the time and opportunities to exhaust all potential ratios and options in terms of lures prior till now, because I can effectively look back and like my memory bank could say, hey, 20 years ago, they were eating yellow in this really clear water. What was up with that? And then I can go try it. And usually it speeds up my process in terms of breaking it down super quick. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's so much to be said for trying a new tactic or technique that the fish haven't seen, a new vibration that they haven't felt. You take a really commonly used lure or tactic and you just twist it up a little bit and you can be super duper successful. Earlier this year, me and my tournament partner brought back a bait that was kind of like an archaic thing that a lot of guys weren't like using, especially in this region or this time of year. And it's just got a different vibration. And it's amazing. Like I'm catching fish that I didn't think I could catch because it's so, they probably knew about it 30 years ago. But these days they're not exposed to it every day, and they're like literally choking on it. And I'm like getting pliers to get it out of their bodies, which is nuts. I remember one time me and Jacob were at his house, and he had a lure back from like I don't know, dude, like the mid 1900s. Like, I'm not even kidding, like 1930 or something like that. And it was called a Shannon twin spin. And it's pretty much a spinner bait that has 2 arms, little tiny Colorado blades, and it's got like a giant gob of bucktail. Like, I mean, it's just disgusting. Like, it looks gross. You don't even want to touch it. And it had this old galvanized hook on it, and it was just this contraption. And I was joking with him. I was like, oh, dude, you should throw that. So we went to Applegate, and this dude first cast lost, and he hooked and lost like a 5-pound smallmouth. And I'm like, dude, otherwise that would be like the hardest fish ever to catch. And he literally first cast hooked this fish, and it jumps. I'm like, oh my God, what is that? You know, and it was on a Shannon twin spin, and it was not that long ago. So there's so much to be said for bringing back an old lure or something.
Didn't you used to handcraft some swim baits, if I remember right?
Yeah. I still, man, I'm like the biggest tackle junkie and dinking around with baits and hooks. And I actually listened to a podcast of a guy who won a big tournament out west. He says, I never changed my hooks. I never dinked with baits. I was like, God, dude, wouldn't that be nice? Because I'm like a slave to the craft. Every lure that I throw is like heavily manipulated, and it doesn't have stock hooks, and it's a color you can't find. It's disgusting, dude. It's such a bad habit, but I love it, man. I'm so consumed with fishing that I don't mind putting like 99.7% of my total mental process towards fishing and learning it and everything, man. It's all good, but I'm consumed for sure. It's bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not it's hard to keep up with all the tackle, all the rods, the reels.
Yeah, I'm a monster. On my lunch, I get a lot of my mail delivered to my mom's house because I live way up in the woods. And I stopped by. I said, hey, I got to pick up some mail. And I stopped by at 12:18 and got mail. And then there was another package I was expecting, and it was delivered at 12:22. So I called her and I said, hey, I'm turning around. There's another box that showed up.
Well, it's
from today.
It's all the little things for me. You know, I mean, 90% of my clients have boats. And everybody always asks, aren't you worried they're going to take what you've shown them and go back and duplicate what you do? And I tell them, no, you know, I don't really, because the average fisherman is not going to pay attention to all the little things that go into that level of success. Like you just said, sharp hooks. You know, I mean, it's nobody likes to retie their leaders. So you get a kink in your leader. Do you keep running that leader, or do you change it out? You know, you'll see me change it out because potentially that's going to cost you a fish. And I cannot, you know, I need to stop that from happening before it happens. And so, you know, I mean, you're going out there with everything pre-tied and preset, but you have to be at such an anal place that everything has to be perfect for that to achieve maximum effort, gets maximum results. And that's just how I live my life. And, you know, I mean, I don't think I could tournament fish. You know, I mean, the anxiety would eat me up. You know, the anxiety is enough when you're guiding, but just the anxiety of, you know, have you ever hooked that fish where you knew I got this in the bag, and then halfway to the boat, you don't have that fish no more?
Yeah. I fished a championship a couple years ago, and day one, I was in 9th, and I had like 20 pounds, really close to the lead, 75 boats, and I'm fishing for 75 grand. And on day 2, I held mentally tough all day, man. And it like 2:48 with a 3:15 weigh in. I had about a 20 minute run. I told my co guard, I said, I'm going to make one more cast, and that's it. And I told him, like, it was really weird, like uncanny. I said, I don't think anybody's out here working harder this couple days than me. It just didn't happen that day. I had 15.6 pounds in the box, and I made a cast. It was like down the side of a boathouse, between a sailboat and a boat slip, over the dock, underneath a tree, on a weed mat. This was legitimately exactly what happened. And my frog lands on the weed mat, and I engage my reel, and I was like, well, here goes, man. guess I'm going to get him next time. And I engage my reel and I twitch my frog one time and it goes, and it literally just gets toilet bowled. And I'm like, oh my God. And just set the hook and it had some resistance and I instantly pinned that fish on the other side of the dock. And it's a cast you wouldn't have made unless it's like a, hey buddy, we got 4 minutes left. This is my last cast.
Right.
Like last ditch effort. You'd never cast her otherwise. And I pinned that fish on the inside of that dock. And I didn't know how to get it. So I kind of like took my rod and put it behind me and I laid down on the dock and I had one foot in my boat because you have to have a contact in your boat or else you're DQ'd. So I have like my foot is like wrapped around my trolling motor cable and I reach over the dock and I grab my braid, 65-pound braid, and I wrapped it around my hand, like literally just over my hand a bunch.
Dude.
And I lifted this fish up and its head cleared. I thought it was a 3-pounder, dude, which would have been great, but it wasn't.
Right.
And its head cleared the dock and my co-angler's in the back of my boat, like literally 20 feet behind me while I'm laying down on a boathouse. He's like, oh my God. And I'm like, dude, like, so I drag this fish across the dock and I bear hug it. And it's like a 7-pounder.
Oh my God.
It's going to cull my smallest fish by 5.5 pounds. Like literally, this is true as the sky is blue. And I shimmy back to the boat and I'm carrying this fish and it's hooked on the frog in its mouth. And I stand up and I'm walking back to like the, belly of my boat by the console to go unhook it and put it in my live well and cull the fish. I'm like, we're on top of the world, man, celebrating everything. And the fish like bucks in my arms. And as soon as it kicks, this arm lifts and the frog comes out and I dropped that fish and it went in the lake. And it would have been a 5.5 pound cull. I would have been leading going into the final day by 2 or 3 pounds. And I went out fishing. I didn't qualify to fish day 3. And I went out fishing. I would have had to catch 18 pounds. I caught 18 pounds in an hour and drove home. And I found out a way. And if I had just landed that fish and culled it, I would have, anything could happen. I'm not saying I should have won or I inherently am great.
No, exactly.
But dude, I dropped a $75,000 fish and I'm ticked about it to this day.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean,
yeah, I've lost.
Because you just answered my next question. I was, in reflection, how do you feel about that? As I'm pissed about it still to this day.
Yeah. It's as a professional angler, dude, it's been like a long journey. Like I've wanted it forever. Right. And to compete at the level that I compete at, like you have to be so critical of yourself. Like it's not fun. To hold yourself accountable for that sort of stuff. And, there's not a lot of things I could have done, but there is things I could have done and I didn't have to happen. And, man, at the end of the day, I'm just believing that it's preparing me for things that other people won't be prepared for. So the next time that it happens, we're good, man. I'm not even worried about it. And, I've been through 100 situations of the same thing. Like my composure is so good these days. I'm not worried about it. Mechanical failures or truck failures or boat failures or losing fish, culling mistakes, anything like that. Like it just doesn't affect me and I'm better because of it. And it's all good. It would have made my life a lot easier though.
But no, I totally agree when people lose lake trout.
Yeah.
So the only thing you'll see me is I'm all smiles. I'm high-fiving and woo-hoo and we almost got him and we're going to get him next time.
Yeah.
Because it's perspective. You'll never see me thrash a rod on the boat. You'll never see me throw a rod down. Some days they just win. And I think once you get to be a certain level of angler, it's easier to accept. There's some days that we win and there's some days that they win. I can tell you, 3 or 4 years ago, one of my guests hooked that state record. He fought that fish for 40 minutes. Never got him closer than 120 feet from my boat. And everybody says, oh, well, how do you know? Well, I can tell you 3 days prior to hooking that fish, I caught a 13-pounder that had a fresh bite mark from his eyeball just past his dorsal fin. I've seen 50-pound lake trout in Idaho. And how big that one's mouth is, he's 50 pounds. That day he won. And then 2 years later, Alex hooks him. One of his guys hooks him. Dude, I watched 2 grown men try to get a rod holder or to try to get a rod out of a rod holder for 15 seconds, which doesn't sound like a long time. But I'm here to tell you, and because, we can see the mark on our screens, you're like, oh, my God. And so when you see 2 grown men try to get a rod out of a rod holder for that long and they can't do it, it's an immense amount of pressure.
Yeah.
And he threw the hooks. I mean, he's eluded us. We've both hooked him at least once. We'll get him, it's just, everything has to be right for it to be our turn on that day. And you accept that, right? You have to, because
you have to. That's I mean, at this level, if you're a professional guide, I'm a professional bass fisherman, like I can't afford to have an emotional response. I can't.
Mm.
I'm going to be losing money way faster than I'm ever going to be able to make it. I think that if people could see the like trials and tribulations that I've been through or on the water, they'd be like really impressed to see how much like I don't dwell in the past. Like I don't care. Something bad happens and it's like a 1 second like bummer. You know what I mean? I remember I think it was a 2013 or so Bassmasters Classic. They had it down in the Louisiana Delta. And at the time, I think that was a $500,000 bass tournament. And if you play back and watch it, Kevin Van Dam, who's one of the top bass fishermen ever. I mean, he's like a Wheaties box household name level.
Yeah, he's household. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember watching him. He was reeling in a fish, which in the biggest tournament of the world, it was a 6 or so pounder, giant, huge fish, dude. It's a career making fish. If you win the classic, like that's it. You're a fixture for eternity. And he's reeling the fish in and he gets it right to the boat and the fish is on a crankbait and it comes off. And in the same motion that fish comes off, his rod loads and he literally rolls into a cast. The exact second that the fish comes off in a $500,000 bass tournament, he literally loads his rod and casts back out. I don't remember exactly how it went down in the aspect of what happened next, but I'm under the recollection that he didn't even acknowledge that happened. And I was like, dude, there's a reason why this guy is a permanent fixture in the sport and an absolute legend, because his level of composure is so much higher, leaps and bounds beyond even the realm of possibility. You know what I mean? So that stuck with me forever. And I've had a heck of a lot of opportunities to have a really crappy day. And whether it's on the way to the water or on the water, and man, it's all good. I can't afford to have an emotional reaction, so I don't. And it took a long time, man. That's something that I've worked extremely diligently on. Just always having a positive mental attitude on the water if I can, and just sticking to the grind.
I have a mantra. I tell myself, if that's the worst thing that happens today, I've still had a great day.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, because in the whole scheme of things, it's just that one act cannot ruin a whole day of being here doing what we get to do. You know, I mean, we're both very fortunate and blessed to, not for lack of hard work or anything else, but I mean, I'm very fortunate to do what I do every day.
Yeah. No, me too, man. I couldn't be luckier, dude. I'm not 100% where I want to be, man. I'm not doing it for a whole full-time career, making $1 million or nothing, but like, I love how hard the process is. If it wasn't this hard, I'd have got bored, man. That's just in my personality. The harder it is, the better. And I'm prepared for stuff that I know a lot of other guys I compete against, maybe they haven't been through. And I love it, dude. The harder it is for me, I'm not going to say the better, because you know what I mean? Less resistance is good too sometimes. But
just learning opportunities.
The process.
It could be a little easier sometimes. It's just like, give me 2 today.
Yeah.
I mean, just, one can even be blind. I mean, just, just 2. But no, I think that's what you build character. If everything was easy and it was given to you, you wouldn't respect it the way that you do, and you wouldn't care for it the way that you do. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. It's that grind, that willingness to achieve excellence every day.
Fishing professionally,
no matter how minute it is,
to compete, and like how many things does anybody really give their 100% effort into?
Right.
Like it's so rare, dude. I've been a retail manager for like 8 or 10 years now, and how often do people really give 100%? So I like to tell people, like, hey man, like, did you give 100%? Like, that's rare. I can appreciate that. If you really did your best, that's amazing. That's a once in a blue moon feat. And that's what fishing is for me, man. It gives me the opportunity to truly give my absolute best and leave my heart and soul on the water. And like, I have so much faith that it's going to work out. I'm not even worried about what's between me and the finish line. No. I know what's at the end, and I know I'm going to get it. You can't convince me otherwise.
No, and I love that analogy. It is when we set out, I've done everything everything that I need to do to maximize the efforts of that day. And so, every day fishing's different. I mean, and everybody's like, well, how are we going to fish? I don't know yet. I mean, until we get out there, I promise you there's 30 rods in my boat and there's all the tackle you could ever want to do what we do. But I have no idea because I never go out with a specific agenda of I'm going to this spot. I'm going to fish with this. We don't, the way that our fish move, we just don't have that luxury. I mean, we have a plan, and then we tackle that plan. But I mean, I never let myself get in that tunnel vision to get stuck in. This is how they're going to bite. This is where they're going to bite. I just don't know until I see how they're reacting on our screens, and that willingness to adapt. People, from what I see other people doing up there, is they're like, well, last year this worked great, and this year they're not doing it. So where'd all the fish go? And you're like, they're here. You just have to get out of that comfort zone and fish for them different, but nobody wants to do that. I use corn and I use anise and shrimp scent, and, which are standbys. But what I tell everybody is I don't have the luxury of catching fish that want to bite. I'm a fishing guide. I have to, not that I have to catch fish, but it's a big part of what we do. And so I fish the conditions. You guys are fishing a fish. We are fishing conditions. And I think that's what's really hard for people to understand is that different mentality of next level stuff,
Yeah. The other thing too, is people don't realize, like, when they're fishing for Lakers or even holdover trout for that matter, or steelhead salmon, bass, it doesn't matter. They so often I hear people say, oh man, those fish are smart. And I think, like, I like to think that I'm kind of smart, and they're like, that fish is so smart. And I'm like, well, in the realm of intelligence, that fish isn't smart. It's not smart at all. Its brain's teeny tiny, but they're conditioned, and they get conditioned over time. And it boils down to instincts and the way that they react to the environment around them. And you're dang right. They know what's natural and they know what's not. They know where to eat. They know how to eat. They know what they need to be eating and what it looks like and how it behaves. And then all of a sudden you take this little pea-brain fish that has no intelligence utterly whatsoever, but it has instincts. And people don't take the time to consider the difference between intelligence and instincts.
Right.
And then you multiply it by the fact that these fish aren't stocked. So if they're going to live, they're going to have had to have been reproduced by a class of fish that preceded them. And that fish only survived because it has habits that make it harder to catch. That's the only way that it is. So
exactly.
The longer you wait, the harder they're going to be to catch, because they're going to act in ways that make them uncatchable. There's still 10-pound largemouth bass in the expo pond because nobody can catch them. And somebody might sometimes, but generally they won't, because the way that those fish are reproduced, they have ideals and habits ingrained in their DNA that's going to make them harder to catch, like being pelagic, like preferring to suspend, like going to certain locations at certain times of year that aren't necessarily super pressured. They're going to cohabitate in areas that aren't going to get the brunt of the fishing pressure and act in ways that are going to make them harder to catch. So absolutely, man, there's so much that goes into it. They're not smart, but they have instincts, and instincts is nature, and nature is hard to contend with.
Exactly. Sure. And one of my great mentors and really good friends, Jim Biddle, the owner of Willie Boats, he said, it always cracks me up that we have a couple $100,000 in gear and tackle to fool something with the brain the size of a pea. And he's right. But, they are conditioned. You look at what we did with Bondi baits the first year we took them to the lake. They were virtually, nobody had a Bondi bait on that lake. And, it was, you put it in my hand, there he is, And then last year, just in the course of a year, I got one on a Bondi bait. And so I think they do learn quick. But like you, I like to think that I'm, intelligent, as much as I can be, and so that's why it's forever changing. You always, skirts, you use them. They're the skirts that they put on those buzz baits and spinner baits and whatnot. You know, I went to, they were keying in on the pulsing motion. So just, you know, being half of a smart aleck, I turned one upside down, put it on top of my tube jig to make it pulse, you know, more like a squid. It was game changing. I mean, you know, just as simple as it sounds now that we say it, you know, but I mean, it's the being receptive to what they're keying in on at that time and the willingness to drop it and to see what, you know, to see what happens. You know, that's the process that I love anyway. You know,
yeah,
is that
when you find a new bait or a new revision, it's like you get a kind of like a free for all for a year.
yeah.
And I'm super lucky because when I was like, I don't know, dude, I got involved in that swim bait stuff when I was a teenager. And like I was I don't want to say the first. I hate quoting stuff that maybe could
no,
be
but I mean, you know,
like,
I know how long you've been
first.
using them, and so you were doing it before it was cool.
Yeah,
you know,
in this region, you know, it blew up in the 90s and late 80s in California, and it kind of trickled its way up. And you know, being a kid in the digital era is blowing up. I had resources to see fish pictures from other places, and I said, hey, they're using big old baits, and that's cool and interesting. And yeah, I started using them, and I'm lucky, man, because the swim baits, I had free for all for a long time around here. And when Steven's talking about this dude is posting like 8-pounders, like what seems like every week, like he wasn't kidding. I mean, we were catching like 7 to 8, 9-pounders, like
it seemed every day.
They lose weight in the summer. Yeah, every day. But certain times of the year, dude, like it was serious business. And glide baits are like a single jointed hard swim bait that just kind of swim in like a really wide S motion. And I had a guy turn me onto those probably when I was like 17. And I was probably one of the first guys throwing it like consistently in the United States. And the first trip I really dedicated to that, I caught a 7.5 and an 8 and an 8.5. And then the next day I caught a 7. And I think I caught a 6 on like a different bait, but regardless, like it was like an upper 30s pound 5-fish limit in Southern Oregon. And it's just like unheard of. Like I haven't done it again to this day, but I had that bait and it was new and they hadn't seen it. And in the same year I saw probably it would have shattered the state record if it was in the spring, like absolutely made the state record that stood for like, I mean, most of my life or 15 years, 20 years or whatever, and just obliterated it. It was a for sure teener in the spring type thing. So, and then, you know, other baits came out. Duo Realis had a spin bait, which is like a sinking prop bait. And like, I just ran train on those fish for like years. It was insane. And they still eat it good, but I was lucky. You know, people don't know, you know.
I mean, if somebody wanted to go out tomorrow and catch a 10-pound bass here in Southern Oregon, I mean, what do you tell them to do? Throw a swim bait, a glide bait, or something different?
Or go to California?
It depends. Yeah, it depends on their skill level. Swim baits are funny, man. They have this stigma of they're a throw it all day till your back hurts, blah, blah, blah. I hate that, dude. It's so just poisonous, that idea. When you first start out throwing them, you should throw them all the time because you need to get familiar because you don't know what's going on. I had a co-angler in a tournament at Shasta this year say, oh, you're a swim bait all day guy. I was like, watch this. And I caught a swim bait fish in like the first 5 minutes and I never casted it again all day. You know, and it's about recognizing opportunities. So I'd say what someone who wanted to catch a 10-pounder in this region would need to do is they better get to work because they have like about a couple weeks or maybe a month to really have a good opportunity at an 8 to 10, 11-pound fish in this region because they're going to be weighing a little bit more right now, holding eggs and stuff. Gotcha. I don't know the moon phase right now. I think it was full last week. So you're kind of on the tail end of a good window right now. But I do pay a lot of attention to moon phase. They need to be fishing primary staging locations outside of spawning bays or areas. That could be as small or as big as a reservoir permits, but essentially it means flat. It means flat with a substrate that is somewhere between gravel and sand, maybe some rocks mixed in type thing. That's where those fish are going to be moving to. You need to be there. You need to be there right now.
Gotcha.
If you want to throw a swim bait, if you're familiar with swim baits, then you probably need to be throwing a swim bait. I've got 7 fish over 10 pounds, 5 of which were in Oregon. One was on a jig, one was on a brush hog. I actually wrote it down. One was on a 10-inch swim bait. One was on a 7-inch swim bait. One was on a 10-inch swim bait, a 9-inch swim bait, and a 5-inch swim bait. So, I mean, you can take the law of averages and ratios. Big swim baits in the daytime, and then I like to fish on the bottom at night. I don't night fish a lot anymore, but when I was trophy hunting, I did a lot, like 100 nights a year. And it's hard to beat a jig at night. A jig with rattles, the big trailer, double wide beaver, or a brush hog on the back of it, in those areas, and you have a really good shot at catching a truly huge fish. And contrary to popular belief, man, I've caught 7 double-digit bass in 7 different places. So most of our reservoirs have potential to catch a double digit. There's even getting to be some double digit class fish starting to show up at Lost Creek. I know a guy who caught one that was like in the heavy 9s last summer, like early last summer. So there's potential there. I have another buddy who caught like an 8-pound class smallmouth out of Lost Creek last year. I got buddies that have caught 7+ pound smallmouth out of Applegate, and I've caught a 10-pounder out of Applegate too. And Immigrant even might still have a couple left. It's really low. Selmac has contended with those class of fish for my whole life. Kind of had a decline, but it's still fishing really good. And then there's some other places sprinkled here or there that I will not mention that have great giant. But yeah, primary points off of staging areas and stuff off of big flats. You need to be up on the flat in a couple weeks as the water temperature gets into the low 60s. Definitely try throwing a big bait. It's good, but if you don't have the confidence in it, a jig is like a fantastic big fish lure. Those two things, a jig or a big swim bait, probably what you need to commit your time to. Nice. Angles are huge. Make sure you break down how that fish feeds and how it should set up. And it may be technical at first, but after a while, you kind of start to understand there's ways that you can pressure big fish into biting that otherwise wouldn't bite, whether it's fishing uphill or sometimes downhill, or how the sun sets up and make them look into the sun type thing. There's a million things you can do that are little tips and tricks that make getting followed by the biggest fish turn into getting bit by the biggest fish. And it took a really long time to learn that, but yeah, you better get it done next month. It's key. The next 30 days.
On a different note, Colby, say I have a couple kids, so I want to go to Lost Creek, and I just want them to experience catching fish. The smallmouth fishery up there is awesome. If you're just looking to catch bass, if you're headed up there with your kids off of your pontoon boat, later in the day, because they're not going to get up, it's what it is. What are you going to throw to just maximize their attention span, right? The time you have them to cast, hook a fish and reel it in. What are you going to throw up there for that? Would you say?
So Lost Creek's awesome fishery to have here because, like you mentioned, man, the smallmouth population is absolutely nuts. There's a ton of fish. There's, most of them are going to be small, 6, 8, 10, 12 inches, a couple pounds here and there. And there's once in a while, you're going to get a really big one mixed in. There's a pretty solid population of 5+ pound smallmouth and 5+ pound largemouth in Lost Creek. So for the kids, definitely focus bass fishing in the summertime. They're warm-blooded, or cold-blooded, so they're affected by the temperature of the water around them. So you definitely can get better numbers in the summer as the water's warmer, their metabolism's higher. For kids in the middle of the day, I'd throw something like a tube jig, a 3.5-inch dry creek tackle tube, 1/4 ounce. It casts good, snags a little bit, but not super terrible. They're going to get it into the strike zone, which is really key too. And they can catch a ton of fish. It's got an open hook, so you don't have to worry about their hook set not being maybe up to par if they're new to fishing. That's a great way. And then what I do when I'm taking new people that are new to fishing or young kids out is get them on a topwater bite. In the evening, get them up there at 5, 6, 7 in the evening in the summer when it's real hot, and throw a popper right along the shoreline. And they're almost certain to catch fish, especially at Lost Creek in the evening on topwater. And as soon as someone who's new to the sport or a kid sees a bass come up and blast something on the surface, they're hooked for life, man. You can't beat it. And then obviously like a Cinco is a really good bet too. Little Ned rigs, little TRD Z-Man plastics on little tiny 6-ounce Ned rig heads. That's a really good bet too. But I don't think there's a better fishery around us than Lost Creek to go catch numbers of fish for youth and getting them involved in the sport.
I agree. It's phenomenal up there. But that topwater bite, once you see it, I don't think it ever leaves you. You know, I mean, Alex has been he's bound and determined to get lake trout on the you know, he throws that whopper plopper, and it cracks me up. I'm like, dude, it's never gonna happen. Yeah. It's just not. And so, but he just refuses to lose faith in that thing. And so, but yes, I agree. Once you see that once you have that experience, it either encapsulates you for your life, or you're just kind of a hobby fisherman from then on. You know what I mean? It's feast or famine.
That topwater bite on bass is what got me hooked when I was a kid in high school. You know, that was one of the first ways I caught some. Just watched people do it online. I was like, that looks like fun. I'm going to go try it. First day out, you know, go catch a few, get a couple good blowups. And I mean, you're hooked from that point.
Right. I have one more question here, Colby. Yeah. What's the most you've ever paid for one of your bass lures?
Oh, I have out of pocket my own dollars. Yes. Last year I paid $274.99 plus shipping for a 12.5-inch Sly Guy rainbow trout glide bait.
And how long did you keep it?
I still have it.
Oh,
catch anything on it yet?
I kind of got it in that tail end of the peak window, so I probably got it in like late May last year. And I didn't land this fish, and I really didn't see it. I'm not going to say it was giant because it was a 12 bait, but it was big, you know. But yeah, I hooked one, and I will in the next 3 weeks. I will hook another one on that. I guarantee you. But yeah, I got some baits that you can't really find anymore, big top waters and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say $100, $150 on average for most of like my real, this stuff I use all the time. It's not even like a novelty.
So that's I mean, my bonding baits are, you know, they're not near that. They're $25.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's for me, I'll throw $25 at a lake trout lure and not even bat an eye. You know, last year I did buy those flies, you know, they're $175 each, and those stung, and I'm still making myself use them. You know, I mean, it's enough far apart to where you're like, guy, if you lose that, man, you're totally paying me for it. But you know, this year I'm over it because I bought them last year, so they're not dead to me, and so I'll use them a lot more this year. But that's, you know, relatively speaking, you know, your lures are. It doesn't even phase you to pay $100 for one of your bass lures. You're just like, it's the going rate, right?
Sometimes I see one, like, because most of the stuff is like garage made, really sought after, hard to get. Like a ton of people want to get them, and they sell out in like I'm not kidding, like seconds, like 30 seconds. A whole lot of bait sells out, and like I see it for sale for like $150. I'm like, oh my god, what a good deal! I better hurry. And then there's a bait called it's a hog hunter, and it's like a 6.5 ounce 10-inch trout soft swim bait, and they're really good. And like my tournament partner jokes sometimes because like he's seen me like tie one on like $100 bait, like unpackage it, put scent on it before like a tournament day and tie it on, and I go to like make my first cast, and snap, and I just send it in like 100 yards into the abyss. $100. Like I tied it on. I've never fished it. It doesn't even like first cast, snap, and we watch it sail into the sunset. And I'm like, right. This is great, dude. I love this.
Yeah. I just tell myself it wasn't gonna work anyway, so forget that bait, man.
Yeah, I've done that 2 times, dude. I've unpackaged a $100 bait 2 times and casted it off first cast. I'm pretty proud, dude.
I mean, that's not awesome, but you know, it's been long enough to where we can laugh about it now, right?
Yeah, and like, make no mistakes, I am not like wealthy. Like this is a serious issue for my finances.
Pretty sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, we know you, and so you know your top ramen nights. You know, I'm more of I'll throw a Seiko so I can have, you know, a hamburger. And you're more I'll eat top ramen for a month to have that.
Yeah, for me to before I went pro and started like traveling and competing and having the boat and all the stuff and the graphs and whatever, I a lot of people don't know this, but I had to like step away from bass fishing. So people are like, where are you at? I haven't seen or heard anything for a long time. And for probably a year and a half or maybe 2 years, I didn't compete in any bass tournaments. I fished a little bit here and there. I talked about bass fishing every single day. But I just couldn't do it. And I recognized that, hey, this is like, I love it, but it's kind of a bad habit for me to get to where I want to get to. You know, financially, I wasn't like putting my enough effort into work and a career and finances and having money and building my credit and gaining resources and stuff like that. And I took almost 2 years off and worked super duper hard and became at the time, I'm pretty much certain I was the youngest store manager in Sportsman's Warehouse company assets, like 100 stores.
Nice.
And I might've been the youngest in company history. And it's just, I'm only good at anything because I love to fish. Like the only reason I can pay attention to literally anything in the world is because I want to fish so bad that I can apply myself if I promise myself that it's really just for this long-term goal of accomplishing my dream. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I took 2 years off, dude, to go and, you know, get ready and make all the revisions needed to my life in order to compete. And it was a lot of it was financial too, but other side of things was like physical stuff too. I was like in the gym every day, running and lifting and trying to get into good shape so I could perform at the top level, and paying attention and reading and studying and theorizing and talking to friends and getting fishing reports. And it was like it was a real strategy. It wasn't just like I took 2 years off and I'm blaming it on fishing.
Right.
No, it was all for a cause.
Well, and that's, you know, I think I've had 2 phone calls this week of people wanting to get into the guiding industry, and my standard response is don't. It's it takes such an absorbent amount of time and effort, and if you're not willing to give it that, you're going to make it a year, but pretty soon your friends and family are going to run out of money and they're not going to book you, and they're, you know, it's going to rely on the public. And, you know, how do you, right now it's flourishing, you know, because of the pandemic and people wanting to spend money locally, and because they're the whole little bit too afraid of traveling and all that, you know, people don't realize, you know, Steven has helped me out exponentially in my guide career. I had reached my ceiling, and then, you know, with partnering with him and utilizing his knowledge with the social media and elevating my ceiling again. You know, when the pandemic hit, we dumped money into the brand and the business. And it's paying off today in huge dividends. You know, and my sponsors, you know, the people don't realize if you had to pay without that sponsorship to get that support, you couldn't afford to do what we do. I mean, let's be honest. You know, I mean, it's the sponsorships play such a big role in what we do and how we do it. But as far as just an individual, you know, I mean, we want to see you succeed, you know, for sure. Is there opportunities for individuals like us to sponsor you in a way of for nothing in return other than here's sky's the limit, you know, maybe don't eat top ramen tonight, eat something a little bit healthier to give you that energy the next day. You know, I mean, is there room in your sponsorship program for those opportunities for individuals? I mean, because it's a talk that we have, you know, that we have to have. Yeah,
absolutely, man. And I'm super lucky. The sponsors that I have right now, a lot of them I've had for a super long time, like a decade type thing. And I'm really, really proud of that. But there's always room to grow. And if someone's interested in, you know, reaching out and supporting in some way, or really, I try to make it worth their while. You know, this is the 4th podcast I've done in a month. At the sports show, I was on the tank talking about fishing tactics, techniques, talking a little bit about sponsors if it applied. Like you mentioned, Steven helping you out with media marketing and things like that, and strategies and ideas, man, it's so huge. And I try to be really dedicated to it. I work down at Sportsman's and that's my job, but it's 50-50, man. I take 50% back to supporting my sponsors and having conversations, doing podcasts, marketing and media. as well. There's always room to join that team, and I'd be glad to work with, I'm sure, a lot of businesses. I'd love for it to apply in the aspect of me helping them too. If there's something that I can do in terms of marketing, media, notoriety, word of mouth, advertising, even signage and stuff like that, that's what I want. I want to feel like I'm doing my part to show gratitude for people that want to support me. If someone had a company and that interests them, they could reach out to me on Facebook, Colby Pearson, ColbyPearson, or on Instagram, Colby_Pearson. And then I'm sure I'll have a website and stuff going here before too long, because the whole tournament thing is getting pretty developed, and networking and everything like that. But absolutely, man, there's opportunity to grow and work with some other companies, and I would look forward to it if that presented itself.
All right.
Or people.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a lot of, as a collective, it's like I said, with gas prices where they are, a lot of people can live vicariously through. I mean, I have a lot of people that follow my social media stuff just because they, logistically wise, they're in New Hampshire, or, we fly people fly here from all over the country to fish here. But they live vicariously through our exploits, and so they support that. I'm very blessed to have the sponsorships that I have as well. And the people don't realize that it's, even if you don't support me personally, if you support one of my sponsors, that's indirectly supporting us. It's it all goes full circle, to where they're doing good things. And so, if you're not going to support us, then just support the companies that support us, I guess.
Yeah, it's huge, man. You got to support the companies that support the fishing industry. I mean, that's massive. There's a set amount of dollars, and it kind of all takes money to compete or be in the industry and involved in stuff. And I'm really cognizant of that. If there's a company that I know outwardly supports fishing or even just the outdoors, man, that's where I try to spend my dollars, however that applies.
For sure.
Exactly.
I kind of got a question for both of you guys. I mean, if you're that 14-year-old kid right now, we're both of you guys, kind of make a living fishing now. I mean, what's your advice? If you're that 14-year-old just kind of entering high school, do you go with try and set up a bass fishing team and go the tournament route there? Or what do you guys do for both of you? Maybe Colby start?
Yeah. So if you're a 14-year-old or you're in middle school or something like that, and you say, hey, I want to be a professional fisherman, fisherwoman, whatever you want to be someday. Absolutely. The first thing that I would do is spend time on the water, get a parental figure, a neighbor, obviously someone that you trust to get you out on the water and start getting those experiences, start cycling through different lures and techniques and tactics, so you get ahead of the punch on that aspect. As you start to get a little bit older, into high school or something like that, you can start a high school fishing team. I watched a video earlier today that said that there's 300 or more high school fishing teams in the country.
That's awesome.
Our region isn't probably super duper prevalent, but I don't think that there's anything inhibiting someone from starting a high school fishing team at their high school. Go to your school counselors, principal, whomever it may be, and say, hey, you're interested in doing that. Hopefully your parents can get behind you and help that process. If you want to bass fish, you can become a conglomerate or associate with BASS and TBF, two different organizations that are involved in high school fishing. Wild West Bass Trail, for that matter, in the West, is involved in high school fishing. Once you meet their criteria to have a club, you can go and compete. And then there's a ton of incentives for youth anglers to get involved. They can get scholarships to go to college and start that route. In terms of overall finance, that's by far the cheapest way to get involved. The two major bass fishing organizations in the country have done a phenomenal job streamlining the process, where you can go from low or no entry fee events at a high school level into college, and then eventually transition into a professional career. You can even win a berth to have a professional career and have a lot of those fees paid for. You can get exposure, gain sponsors, so on and so forth. Aside from that, the one thing that I would recommend you do, I wish I knew more about it, is you have to take your finances and your strategies in regards to finances extremely seriously. It's very expensive, just to make a living these days, but let alone to have the resources like the boat or the graph, fish finder, truck, travel expenses, time away from work that you may need. As soon as you can, start a savings account. As soon as you can, get a credit card, take your bills extremely seriously. Make sure you stay up on your payments. I'm talking to 14-year-olds about their credit score, but trust me, when you're 28, you're gonna wish that someone did, and I'm that guy right now.
Right.
If you have a family member that can maybe make you like an authorized user on a card that you can use or whatever, and they can make their payments consistently, that's huge, because to compete at the top level of fishing, unfortunately, you probably are going to want those resources. You can be a phenomenal angler, and you can be successful without them. I'm not saying that that's a hindrance that's going to prevent you from accomplishing your goals, but it's definitely going to help to have the right equipment, the right boat that's under warranty, trucks, vehicles, travel, expenses, so on and so forth. If you're going to school and you have the opportunity to look into marketing is a career or school focus, that's huge. Marketing and digital media is massive. And the number one tip I have, if you want to become a professional fisherman, and I need to listen to my own advice, you need to start a YouTube channel and get a lot of exposure as soon as possible. And that's going to carry you a long way. That's all I got. Cross your fingers.
Yeah.
And so I agree with Colby 100%. If you want to become a professional fishing guide, do everything he said until you graduate high school and then go to marine mechanics school. Set yourself apart from every other fishing guide that's out here right now. The guides that I know that have that education on how to work on motors, they are hireable anywhere they want to go, from Florida to Costa Rica. I have a buddy that guides up in Alaska and then goes to Costa Rica on vacation, fishes there, all because he can work on these motors. And because, my boat's in the shop up at Portland Marine Electronics right now getting repowered. Rick's had it, I can't work on it. So I have to pay somebody to work on it. And it's a month out, Colby, if your boat breaks down, it's a month before somebody's going to get to it. Otherwise, you're going to pay such an absorbent amount of money because they got to work on it on their time off. And so that would be my number one after high school. Finances for sure, because everything we do is super expensive and you got to be able to borrow money to have those assets. But educate yourself and make yourself separate from every other guide applying for the same position. And I think that's one of the areas that is lacking is marine mechanics. It's really hard to find a guy that has time to work on your boat. And when you do take it in, you don't ask, I don't ask Rick price, nothing, fix it. I'll pay you whatever it is at the end of this day. I'll pay it because I have to have it. And so That's my number one. Look at avenues to make yourself different, I guess.
Yeah.
Yep. I totally concur with that too. If you don't, take a liking or interest in marine mechanics, you're going to end up like me, and you're going to have a gigantic bag of tools. In fact, multiple in your boat and in your truck. And you're going to get pretty good at turning wrenches at your own expense over a decade also. So I wish I went to school for marine mechanics. I got pretty good in the last few years. I'm not going to lie. But it was by force and it was really stressful. So
yeah.
If I could go back, that's probably the one thing that I would have done different as well.
Yeah. Looking at a $25,000 motor, I just had to bribe Rick this year. I'm like, I'm going to break in these motors and I'm going to have hours on it. I need the service done. I said, so how about you come fishing with me? And then when we're done fishing that day, we'll just pull my boat out of the water and you can do the service on, there. And he's like, yeah, I'll do that, Todd. So, it works out, but yes, I agree. It's the one thing I wish I would have done was learn how to work on those motors.
Yeah. Or become good friends with the marine mechanic. And that's what I've done. I take care of my guy. Mike's Marine and
take care of it.
Mike, you're the man. Thanks for everything. And take care of you.
Yeah. Don't cash this check until like 2023 May.
Yeah, seriously. As soon as you see me on TV, you can go to the bank. Just fill in the date.
Yeah, exactly. So
One other thing I wanted to touch on, Colby. We got the drought here in the West affecting a lot of our fisheries, especially the salmon and steelhead. Do you see it affecting the bass fishing at all? I mean, it seems like some of the reservoirs pretty much have no water now.
Yeah.
But like, what do you see from the drought and everything?
Oh man, it's such a bummer. And gosh, I'm gonna try not to speak what I'm thinking exactly on my mind. Yes.
No way, Colby, say it.
Man. Okay. 100% truly
100%.
honest. Some people are going to be like, oh, dude, really? I have lived in Southern Oregon my whole life. And if they publish one more article with a picture of immigrant with like 2% water level and say that it's some sort of recurring drought and not to some capacity, maybe a little oopsies on water management, dude, I can't do it. I can't just read the same article every day. So yeah, we're in a drought for sure. It sucks, dude. The fisheries are going down. Hyatt, man, was a premier fishery 15, 20 years ago. Like, I mean, dude, it was the best. Giant fish, tons of fish. It was stocked with Florida strain fish in the 1990s, and they got huge. They got record class. I'm certain we would have seen multiple state records come out of there if it had the opportunity. Sorry, my phone's starting to lose some power here. If it had the opportunity to keep cycling like it was, it's down to nothing. I think Hyatt is close to done in terms of a fishery, and it's going to reset, and hopefully it's cyclical and maybe it can come back. Howard's in really similar shape, and that really bums me out. Immigrant is the bottom of those chains, and it's super low too, and that bums me out too. Lost Creek has a major tributary of the Rogue River, and they have to, at some capacity, save back enough water to regulate the flows on the Rogue. So it's not going to be as drastically affected. Lake of the Woods is a natural lake, so same thing. Selmac is pretty easy to fill. It's like 20 gallons. And, so yes, to answer your question, absolutely, man. The drought is brutal. It's affecting our fisheries. We have lost some fisheries, hopefully only temporarily. In the meantime, and I don't think it's affected anything better. The one thing I will say is as soon as they fill up, the next couple of years are going to be really, really good. Most reservoirs are what I consider a generally sterile environment, and they need to have drawdowns and fill back ups to put a lot more nutrients in the water and kind of support the food chain and the ecosystem in that aspect. So ironically, being low for a while and then filling up could actually be good. Being low for a long period of time, it's hard to say. All these lakes fluctuate a ton every year. Applegate elevation, surface elevation changes 100 vertical feet a year type thing. Lost Creek's really similar too. So it's really easy to capitulate a situation with a sense of like dramatized effect in terms of pictures and stuff when you go take a picture of Applegate in February. Although if you went and took a picture of Applegate in February of a non-drought year, it would be the same level. So there's no sensationalism or anything like that involved. I'm sure. Right. I'm sure of it. But no, man, it's a bummer, and I just hope we get a lot of rain. It rained for like 40 minutes yesterday, like a biblical rainstorm. There's water filled the roads instantly, and then it stopped. That was pretty sad, but yeah, dude, the drought's a bad deal. And it's real. I mean, there's a drought for sure.
Has that affected like the local tournaments? Isn't there like local bass tournaments that go on?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of local bass clubs, Rogue Valley Bass Masters, the Medford Bass Club, or Medford Bass Circuit rather, and then there's a Basin Bass Club in Klamath Falls that are all kind of reliant on our fisheries. They've had to fish a lot in Northern California. There's a couple impoundments on the Klamath River. Iron Gate Reservoir is an example. Doesn't fluctuate super violently, although they are talking about removing the dams sometime soon.
Right.
We're not going to get into that. And going to Shasta and stuff because it's a huge body of water as well. But they've still had clubs, so it's a good time to get out and support the local clubs. Go join Rogue Valley Bass Masters if you're in Medford, or the Medford Bass Circuit, or Basin Bass Club if you're in Klamath Falls. While I'm on the note of bass tournaments, later this year in a couple months, the Oregon Bass Federation will be having 2 events in Southern Oregon. It's a 1 weekend for 2 events. One day is on Applegate, one day is on Lost Creek. I can't remember off the top of my head the exact dates of those, so don't quote me, but you can research Oregon Bass Federation. BASS is Bass Federation, that organization. They're having 2 events. It was quite a bit of lobbying on behalf of myself and probably a couple others to get them to come down to this region and just telling them, hey, there's a huge untapped potential down here. There's some good fishermen. There's some good fisheries. We would love for you to have some presence down here. So if you can support those events, please show up to those events or show interest in those events or show gratitude for them coming down. What that is supplying our region's anglers an opportunity to pursue bass fishing at the highest level through the federation, which is a state level, then a regional level, then a national level. There will be 10 individuals from Oregon who qualify to fish the regional, and there is some financial compensation if you qualify to help, with finances to go to that event or whatever. So I wanted to make sure I threw that in there. Super important. Oregon Bass Federation coming to Southern Oregon later this year. Please research that. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on any of my social media platforms. I'd be really, really glad to refer you to the right person or help you get signed up for those events.
Just real quick, Colby, on that note, would you clarify, how somebody that doesn't fish the circuit, how, can you clarify how they can support that? Is it showing up at the weigh-in or, what does that look like exactly?
Yeah. So if you're interested in joining a bass club, we'll start there. Most of these clubs have a social media platform, so look them up on Facebook, inquire when their club meeting is, go to it, see if it fits your style, maybe learn some things. And if you want to compete, even if you want to learn, I mean, when I first started, it was more based in learning than it wasn't competing. So these club level events aren't designed to have competition be the most foremost focus of them. It's about learning. It's about camaraderie, meeting friends, and networking, and then sharing in a passion you love. So go to the meetings and see if it's for you. As far as the Bass Nation stuff, become a member of the organization BASS, which is like Bassmaster, the really prolific organization nationally based. And then you can inquire how to get signed up for those events. There'll be an entry fee and stuff, and that's a little bit higher level type of event. And then show up to the events, find out what time the weigh-in is. Usually it's 3 or 3:30 or something like that. Go to the weigh-in, see some fish, ask some questions, take some pictures, and just enjoy the time. And then hopefully you get involved in bass fishing and want to go compete yourself.
Right. Exactly. Perfect.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
I think I got one more question before we actually get to our very last question of the night.
Sure.
What would be the one bass fishery on the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, Northern California, maybe Idaho, that you think everybody should go experience like once in their life?
Yeah. There's a couple cliche ones. Clear Lake, for good reason. They're not cliche. They're amazing fisheries. Clear Lake is like one of the best bass lakes in the country, and it's awesome. The California Delta is one of the best bass fisheries in the country, and it is awesome. It's one of a kind, and you should probably go there too. Lake Havasu, the same thing. But I'm going to say, if you could go to one, if you're going to come out to the West to fish, go to the Columbia River, because it's huge and it's unique and it's big water and there's giant smallmouth and it's a phenomenal fishery. And I love going there, man. It's Clear Lake's awesome and the Delta's awesome, but the Columbia River is really a special place.
That's good to know.
Absolutely.
All right. So we won't keep you much longer. End of every episode, we basically like to ask our guests for the piece of alpha. So what's your best advice that you can give anybody watching tonight? It could be fishing, could be life advice, but what's that one piece of advice that you think everybody should take away from this episode?
Takeaway from this episode is no matter where you come from, no matter how the cards are stacked against you, if you have something that you believe in, that you want to accomplish someday, stay the course, no matter how hard it is. I set the trajectory from a young age of what I wanted to do and how it was going to happen. And I'd be lying if I told you that I didn't expect that it was going to fall on my lap, because I thought that if I worked harder than anyone I knew or anyone I heard of all the time, it was just going to happen. And that hasn't been the case, but I've stayed the course through all the trials, all the tribulations. It's made me a much better person because of it. I've excelled at many other aspects of my life, from business to interpersonal communication and many other things, by pursuing bass fishing with the entirety of my heart and soul. And it's led me on this journey, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. So if there's something you want to do, damn it, go do it. Don't take no for an answer. You can't. There's billions of people on the earth, and if you're gonna shine out as one of the few, the top 10 of anything, you have to be so committed to that one thing. So that's it, man. It's, never give up and trust in the process and enjoy it. And just know that no matter how hard it is, it's shaping you into something, preparing you for something down the road, whether it's in line with your ideal goals or not. You can't live. There's no other way to live. Not for me. No way.
Yeah. I love it. Well, with
I
that,
agree.
thank you very much, Colby. We really appreciate you coming out tonight. This time is awesome. We hope a lot of people learned a lot of things about bass fishing out here in the West and a little bit about tournament life. So yeah, with that, guys, everybody, thank you very much for joining us tonight. If you'd like to find out more about what Todd and I are doing with the Northwest Fishing Club, you can check us out at northwestfishing.club. Be sure to show Colby some love on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. If you'd like, we've got a giveaway going on our social media platforms. It's at nwfish.club or NW Club, and that's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And we've also got an opportunity for any of you anglers out there that just like to talk fishing. We'd love to hook up with you. We've got that. It's called the Wall Hangers List, and there's a link for all of this down in the description. And with that, guys, have a great night.
Thanks, guys. Take it easy.
Thanks,
Thank
Colby.
you.